Thank you. Welcome back to Senate Education. It's Tuesday, March 29th. Our plan is to go until 4:15 today, which gives us a few minutes to introduce SQ 48. And this isn't, I just would like Ms. St. James to, oh, thank you. I will pass these around. This is the language. This is just,
some of you may already have copies at the bottom of your file.
oh, here you are, those two. Okay. To remind committee members as well as those watching, this is the governance bill that Senator Hooker and others put in. Ms. St. James did a draft of some language that I've asked her to take us through and thought that maybe after we could ask a couple of questions, a few questions, and then move on to additional work, knowing that we'll return to this tomorrow. I'll ask Daphne to put it back on the calendar for committee discussion. I'm also going to ask Daphne to put the $90 million surplus also just on the calendar tomorrow for some committee discussion. Ms. St. James, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. What you have before you today is a strike all amendment of S248, turning it from the permanent changes in statute to a report. So section 1 is the report requirement. Section 2 is the effective date, so nice and short. Subsection A of section 1 is a legislative intent section that reads, it is the intent of the General Assembly to encourage a more inclusive shared governance structure among Vermont's public higher education institutions. The Vermont State Colleges and the University of Vermont are essential parts of Vermont's landscape. It is the best interest of the state it is in the best interest of the state that the voices of faculty, staff, and students reach the Board of Trustees and have an impact on their decision-making processes. The General Assembly acknowledges that VSC is going through a transformation period and encourages VSC to think about governance during this period. The General Assembly also acknowledges that UVM has made progress in getting those voices heard by including faculty and staff on some standing subcommittees of the UVM Board of Trustees. However, the General Assembly encourages both VSC and UVM to increase communication and input from faculty, staff, and students within their governance structures. Subsection B, which is on the top of page 2, is the report requirement. On or before January 15, 2023, VSC and UVM shall both issue written reports to the Senate and House Committees on Education, detailing the progress each institution has made to advance the communication and input of faculty, staff, and students with the Board of Trustees for each institution. Options VSC and UVM shall consider in increasing such communication and input shall include creating Board of Trustees liaisons to the faculty, staff, and students, as well as adding faculty, staff, and students to standing trustee subcommittees within each institution. The report shall include an analysis of the pros and cons of each option the institution considered, details of efforts already taken, plans for future efforts, and recommendations for any legislative action to increase faculty, staff, and student input within the governance structure of each institution. And the effective date is July 1 of this year.
So of course, once we get to a spot that the committee is comfortable on this issue, we would likely attach this and return it to the House on their higher education bill. Senator Hooker.
I'm fine with having the Vermont State Colleges increase their communication, certainly with the board. UVM has established its faculty senate. They have members on subcommittees. I would like to see a consideration of having faculty and staff on the board, as well as the considerations that are being presented here. You know, as I said, UVM has its faculty senate, and yet 95% of that senate voted to have this shared governance idea go forward. So I'd like to see that included if possible.
Okay, I'm going to note that, and when we come back to some committee discussion tomorrow, if it's okay with you, then we'll kind of dig into it. But I think that's a fair point. I would say the other things that I'm going to raise tomorrow is page 1, line 16. I don't think we were encouraging see, we're really asking them. It's saying that as they're going through this transformation process, we're asking them. And the other piece, Senator Hooker, related to what Senator Hooker said, the way I was going to phrase it, but I'm comfortable doing it whatever way the majority of the committee want to, is somewhere we might say, this is on page 2, where we mentioned that options that VSC and UVM would consider, but it wouldn't be limited to these options. Even if we were to add faculty, staff on the board as an option, I would say even there, I don't want to limit it. I mean, there might be other things that we're not thinking about. And again, this is just a report back. This is considering center lines. Anything else you want to put on the list?
Well, bylaws. I mean, how might they change their bylaws to be more inclusive? That's pretty specific.
Okay. Anything else, Senator Chittenden?
I don't know how to do this. I do generally like the direction it's going in, but recognizing the existing governance bodies so that they are at the table in these discussions. I'm not seeing necessarily where the faculty assembly or the faculty senate is forced or encouraged or otherwise engaged in this report.
Good point. So who else who those, we can dig in a little bit tomorrow, but who those folks are, those organizations that should be considered and pulled into these conversations? That makes sense, whether it's the current board of trustees, the faculty senate.
There's also a working group that.
Yeah, there's some others that should be
state colleges
considered. Senator Tiranzini. Again, it's a report back. It's consider these options.
Yeah, I think I'm all set right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
Senator Perschlick.
Well, I would agree with Senator Hooker that I'd rather see than just adding staff. I don't know if this is worth doing. It would be my honest interpretation. I just read some stuff and I thought about it, but
Yeah.
it seems like busy work from people that we already know what their opinion is, and they're just gonna tell us what they already told us. You know, they're gonna say, yeah, we looked at it, and this is what we're doing, but we don't want to add board members, but I don't know, well, sometimes there's a value to that, but it feels a little bit about just like kicking the can down the road. But I'm not sure doing nothing isn't better.
I'm not.
But I'm open to be.
Yeah, no, I think this is, I think they're getting the message that we're interested in this topic, that we want to see something happen. And this is, you may be right, they might come back and say exactly what they've been saying, but I'm hoping they take this direction and actually come back and do something. But I think, and I could be wrong, but the current Senate makeup, I don't think we're putting, I could be wrong, faculty and staff on the boards this year without a major battle. And I think that then gets vetoed, and then I think it's an exercise in, intellectual exercise, really, in discussion. So I'm just trying to live in the world of reality with some of this stuff, and I think giving folks an opportunity to have this conversation with stakeholders makes some sense. Senator Lyons.
Well, I'm just looking at the section 1, the intent language. And so we say we encourage a more inclusive shared governance. How about we expect?
Yeah.
So, I mean, making the language a little more forceful.
Yeah.
And then expecting some information about, so for example, specific steps they will take. They have options. And we could add a timeline for decision-making within each institution. So that actually have to think through what they might be doing. it could be the same as UVM. I mean, say we're gonna add folks to a standing committee, that's a good start. So maybe, I don't know how else to say it, but I agree with you. I don't think it's time to mandate anything, frankly. But we do want to see some thought going on.
Mhm.
And to start a process towards a more inclusive governance structure. So how would you phrase that? Is there, so when we say VSC, some colleges already have a pretty robust system. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Well, we're going to return to it tomorrow. But given some of this discussion you've heard, I feel comfortable asking, unless I see objection, to you using language around expecting, asking, getting rid of the encouraging. And I think also recognizing that other stakeholders need to be involved in these processes that happen over the summer. Certainly, I think we're all in agreement that we should see some language around bylaws being examined that would include more inclusivity. And then what I'd like to take up tomorrow, if it's okay with you, is just have well, we could also go ahead and put this in, which says the faculty, one of the other considerations would be to actually get faculty and staff on board. If we're saying,
if they're considering,
everything, we might as well give them some options. Yeah. So I think all of that, you would be comfortable with that coming back to us tomorrow afternoon for another 20 minutes, just maybe hashing some of this out.
You want me to make the changes for
I'd like you to
tomorrow?
make the
Yep,
changes
no
for
problem.
tomorrow. And then I think 15 minutes of taking us through it again tomorrow would be great. Anything? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So our final piece of business today is finishing the first section of H727, which is an act relating to the exploration, formation, and organization of union school districts and unified union school districts. Heather, so if you want to testify on how we wrap things up, feel free to reach out to Daphne, and we'll get you on the calendar later this week.
All
Right, thanks for coming in. Senators may be receiving emails a little bit on H727. We're not in the withdrawal section yet. That's where we're going to be hearing from colleagues and others. But what we are going through is really largely some of the technical corrections and, dare I say, less controversial pieces of it. So, Ms. St. James, do you want to pick up where you left off with us on Thursday?
Sure. Again, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel.
And if I may, sorry, Ms. St. James, Senators, there are three. Daphne was very helpful. And we have a full copy of the bill. We have the first section that we're going over right now. And we have a separate section with the withdrawal section. And so we are in, again, chapter 11, the main rewrite, 114 pages.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If you all want to write chunk 1 on the top of it.
Okay,
And I do have extras if anyone's missing anything.
thank you.
oh, yes, she did.
Can I have the chunk 2, just so I have it?
And there is a third chunk.
Chunk 2.
The outlining.
Chunk 1 is one of 114.
Correct.
Is
And then
chunk
chunk
2 the
two.
withdrawals?
Is withdrawal language, and chunk 3 is still addressing withdrawals, but withdrawals underway. So chunk
Okay.
2 is language that is intended to be inserted right in the middle of chunk 1 to address withdrawal in
Okay.
perpetuity. And chunk 3 is session law to address withdrawals underway.
How many pages is chunk 3?
I don't think Daphne's printed that.
I don't think so.
yet.
Okay, just want to make sure.
We don't
So
have
we do
it
not
yet.
have chunk 3. Okay.
No,
great.
if we get
Okay.
to that
Daphne
today.
will, we won't. Yeah.
That's what we got.
Okay, so
Sections, chapters, and sub-chapters, or is chunk an official thing?
It's not, which is why I didn't put it on there. Ask you all to write it.
thank you.
So are we on pages 1 through 114, 1 through 9? No. No, there's one. What are we on?
We're on the,
We're on this right here,
The big one,
Yeah.
the big
right,
one.
the big one.
the big
The
one.
big one, yeah, I got it. 114 pages. Piece of cake.
And where did we leave off?
Well, so I earmarked page 19. We jumped around quite a bit.
Yeah, I was hoping you were gonna say 113, but there we go. Okay,
So my suggestion is to have also open or printed out. I don't, everyone, okay, let's just go with chunk 1. It may be helpful to refer to the outline at some point.
Okay.
If we get off,
We
if
We
we
do have
get
the
off.
And this is the other.
Yes, and that,
the other one.
okay.
If anyone is missing the outline, just let me know.
So just to bring everyone back to the same page, we're talking about the first section. It's the first subchapter of the rewrite, and it has to do with the study committee process. So remember, a union school district is 2 or more school districts that are combined, and now they're 1 school district. How do you get to that 1 school district? You form a study committee, and the study committee has to do a ton of work. And they have deliverables that they have to produce, and so that's what we're talking about now. So I earmarked page 19, which is kind of in the middle of section 708, which is talking about the study committee and who has to be on the study committee in order for the work to make sense and be viable. So theoretically, anyone could be interested in joining a union school district, but it may not make sense for them to be a part of the union school district. Part of what the study committee is doing is trying to determine who are the school districts that need to be involved in order to recommend formation of the union school district. And those are called necessary to the formation. And then there are advisable. So perhaps it would be great if they join, but they're not necessary to the formation of the school district. So you'll see those terms necessary and advisable throughout the study committee process. And so on page 19, at the very bottom, subsection C, I'm looking at specifically lines 12 on, talking about, so one of the things the study committee has to do is propose, so if the study committee meets and says, let's go forward, let's form a union school district, one of the things they have to do is prepare proposed articles of agreement. And so the very end of page 19, 20, 21, and to the very top of page, I guess just to the very bottom of page 21, contains the items that need to be in those proposed articles of agreement. And that is all from current law. Do you want to go over any of those? So that's if the study committee has met, they've done their work, and they're recommending formation of a union school district. The study committee can meet and decide it is inadvisable to form a union school district. And so I'm on the bottom of page 21, line 20, subsection B. So if a study committee determines.
I just want to clarify, early on you had said that the highlighted sections were new language. Is that accurate? No, I mean, I don't mean to say you said it. I have a note that that's what somebody may have said at some point.
So the highlighted sections are meant, so it is new language.
Yes.
It is meant to reflect areas where the House made policy decisions.
Okay,
So there is other language in here that is not highlighted that is new, but it was included in the draft that came from AOE.
okay, so where we're talking about the new articles of agreement, this was not where the House the House basically took the suggestions from the Agency of Education.
Correct, and the suggestions from the Agency of Education were essentially to keep everything from current law the same.
Thank
It's
you.
all the same.
Okay, great.
But it's underlined because it's new to this stuff.
Because you, so
Because it's a
everything you
strike
guys review will be underlined,
Yeah.
because you start with this bill starts with a repeal of the entire chapter.
Oh, serious.
It's like a strike-all amendment.
It
That's
is.
right.
For a whole chapter.
Thank you.
Quiz.
I did think about putting like a Jeopardy section at the end of it to get everyone's attention, but, okay, so the study committee meets, it does its work, it decides to go forward, it comes up with the items in the proposed articles of agreement. We're on page 21, line 20. They could also decide it's a no-go.
Sure.
And if they do that, then they can vote to dissolve and they're done. Either way, the study committee has to come to an end at some point. So on page 22, subsection E, this addresses how a study committee dissolves. So if it proposes to form the Union School District, then once there's a vote of the electorate on whether or not to form the Union School District, then the study committee dissolves. Or it dissolves if they vote that it's inadvisable to go forward. And that's all current law. So the study committee's met, it's decided to go forward. Who reviews their work? What's the next step? So section 709, we're on page 22, line 14, review by local school district boards, consideration and approval by State Board of Education. So the committee has to write the report and the proposed articles of agreement. And so they send them to the school board of each school district that was a part of the study committee, whether that was necessary or advisable. And the school districts involved can give the study committee feedback, but the study committee is the sole author of that report and has sole discretion over the contents of that report. Then if the study committee, again, if they decide to move forward and recommend formation of a Union School District, then they have to send their report, I'm on page 23, to the Secretary of Education, who reviews it and submits the study committee report and the Agency of Education's recommendations to the state board. That's all current law. The state board considers the report. It will give the study committee an opportunity to be heard. It could ask the secretary or the study committee to go back to the drawing board and make further investigation. I'm on the middle of page 23, lines 13 through 15. And it may request that the study committee amend the report or the proposed articles agreement or both. So once the state board has done all of that, at the bottom of page 23, starting on line 18, subdivision 2, if the state board finds that formation of the proposed Union School District is in the best interests of the state, the students, and the school districts, I'm going to pause there because that's all current law. What's new is an addition of aligns with the policy set forth in section 701 of this title. And that is an effort to capture section 701 is the policy section. And that is an effort to capture the goals of Act 46. So, right, current law doesn't ask anyone to take the goals of Act 46 into account because these statutes were written in 1967. So what this
Again, this came from AOE
correct.
and the House agreed with it.
Correct.
Okay.
So if the state board finds that can make those findings, then it shall approve the study committee's report and proposed articles of agreement. And then that becomes the final report and the final proposed articles of agreement. And we're on the top of page 24, the chair of the study committee has to file a copy with that approved final report to the clerks of each school district involved, whether that's necessary or advisable. Right, so the school district's already got a copy of the report, but the State Board of Education process can require both them and the agency to do more work. So this is making sure that the individual school districts who are going to be voting on whether or not to join have all of the final thoughts on this process. Now it goes to the voters. So we're on page 24, line 7, section 710. Vote to form union school district. And again, this is all current law. So the voters of each school district, and again, remember, none of this happens if the study committee said.
We keep going because I'm reading ahead of you. So
Oh, okay.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Nope. Okay.
I'm
Okay.
just down a little bit.
Everything we're going to talk about from now on is only if the study committee decided to say that this is an advisable thing to go forward. So the voters of each school district identify it as necessary or an advisable vote on whether or not to form the proposed school district, the proposed union school district. And then the rest of page 24, so lines 13 through 15 are all current law, and those are just how the vote happens.
So this is where I wanted to ask the question about the vote should be held on the date specified in the final report. So ordinarily, I'm just thinking about the vote and when it would be held. And would it be held? It could be held anytime if it were. Is there any specification in the final report about a date? Or it has to be consistent with a school board budget proposal, or is there anything else there? That's all.
Let's go back to page 20-ish and find that.
I didn't memorize that. Blazing.
So on page 21, line 9, subdivision 11, the proposed articles of agreement need to include the date on which the proposal to create the union school district and the election of initial union school district board members will be submitted to the voters.
But it could be any day.
But
it could be any day. I mean, it could be a special election.
Yeah, so
as opposed to town meeting or school. Is there any language in here that suggests it might be concurrent with another election? I mean, who's organizing the election? Is it the school that's doing that, or is the town clerk doing that?
we have 100 more pages to tell us that.
Okay.
That's how granular this gets.
It does get granular.
Great.
Okay, I'll wait. Okay, I'm ready.
No, it's a really good question. I think it's a really, really important question. Because I think what you're concerned is everyone that this would just get lost. These kinds of elections and,
Interesting.
yeah.
And
Okay.
I hope you hear from the Secretary of State's office, because they were in the committee that worked on drafting this.
That's good to know.
And the, specifically the Director of Election, and he's so I encourage you to hear from Secretary of State's office. Okay, so we are on page 24. We finished page 24. We're moving on to page 25. Vote to elect initial members of the union school district.
Oh, so this is a board vote anyway.
No, this is the vote of the electorate.
Okay.
So at the same time, the voters are voting on whether or not to form the union school district, they're also voting on potential board members. Because if they vote to form, they have to have people pick up the business of the school district to get them up and running in order to provide the education for their students. So at the same time, they're voting, it says right there, at the meeting warned to vote on the formation of a union school district, the voters shall also elect initial members who will serve on the board if the voters approve the formation. And again, this is almost exclusive, it's almost all current law. You'll see that what this does is it gets into how the votes happen depending on whether it's the proportional to town population model, the modified, hybrid model, the at-large representation, because there's different people voting for board members depending on which model that is. So when I say it's mostly current law, remember that hybrid option, that modified at-large option is not in current law, but it's been around and sanctioned since 1975. So
Okay.
it's not in the statutes. So the vote to elect initial members shall be by Australian ballot. Early and absentee voting applies, and that is just kind of general provisions. And then we get into the how each vote occurs. So what subsection B is saying is just the initial membership is going to be pursuant to the method of representation set forth in the Articles of Agreement. And then there's some helpful terms in subsection subsection C, page 25, line 17. These terms are not defined in current law in this way. And so these terms are added to provide clarity to just what Senator Lyons is getting at, who's doing what clerk. When someone says something is the clerk, what clerk is that?
Okay.
Starting at the very bottom of page 25.
Who's Thomas, by the way? I have to sit through this.
He had a meeting with the governor.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I am.
Yeah, you're serious.
Okay. If you could meet with Senator Chinden later.
I'm sure it'll be a great option if he needs help sleeping. So I don't know if you want me to go over these specific terms, but it's just in reference to what does the school district mean,
Sure.
Town clerk,
Yeah.
school district. And those terms are defined in a way that you can go back to it for reference if you're unsure of what clerk someone is referring to in the initial election process. Those are terms that apply only to this section.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you jump to page 28, subsection D, line 1, is what does the vote look like and how do you get who can be nominated and what does the vote look like if it is for a proposed unified union school district. And then it gets into if it's proportional to town population on page 28. On page 29, it's modified at large. And then page 31 is at large representation. And then that gets repeated on page 32, line 16, subsection E, for a proposed union elementary or union high school district. And it goes in again, proportional to town population, modified at large, and at large representation on page 36. The vast majority of this is current law. There was detail and clarity added, but the concepts are all the same.
Okay.
But this will spell out if you're forming a proposed unified union school district and you have your study committee in their proposed articles of agreement have elected to choose the proportional to town population representation model. You can go to one place to find out who's an eligible candidate and who's voting.
Great. That is helpful. Great.
Do you want me to get more granular than that? So that will take us to page 37. Remember, each section talks about who's eligible to be a candidate and how does voting happen and who votes. At the bottom of page 37, line 16, this addresses weighted voting. So if representation on a union school district board is apportioned based upon population, And those subdivisions just refer back to a union school district or a unified union school district or a union elementary school district who's chosen the proportional to town population model. Then it's just a reminder that the union school district may achieve proportionality through a system of weighted voting. And remember, that's giving one person more than one vote in order to weight their votes to achieve proportionality. Does that make sense?
Sounds like waiting to.
Current law, all in current law. On page 38. Very top, section 712, the contents of the warning for the votes to establish the union school district and elect initial board members. This is almost identical to what is in current law. There is an addition.
Okay.
Okay.
My question is going to be, this is really specific. I know, it's great. It's really good. Is there a little handbook for people that AOE hands out that has all the nitty gritty?
I'm not aware of it. I think this is it.
This is it.
Oh, really?
Okay.
That's
Or Donna,
It's a
I
big
mean,
handbook.
emailing Donna.
Yeah.
right.
Did you write all this yourself?
No, I wrote some of the later sections, but this primarily came from AOE and they've been working on this for years.
Yes.
I cannot take credit.
And again, just for those watching, et cetera, this has been operational now for a long time. And this is greater detail. This is if something new might pop up, needing additional votes, that sort of thing.
Yes, and you'll see in my teacher's edition
Yeah.
of this printout, I've noted where there might be something that's not in current law, but is proposed language that the House has adopted based on guidance AOE was giving out to make up for holes in the law that they came across as they were helping school districts merge.
Okay.
And I'll flag those when we get there. But for the warning piece, there was line 7 through 9, where it starts, Article 2 of the warning shall not include names of candidates for the Union School District Board. That's not, that sentence is not in current law, but that is a piece that AOE provided guidance on recently, and felt should be added here to make it clear that individual names are not provided in the warning. It's not. But the warning itself, so pages 38, 39 through the majority of page 40 is all current law.
So I just have to ask why that sentence was put in there about not including the names of the candidates on the.
I don't know the answer to that question. But I can certainly, I know Donna's listening and I'm sure she'll
Okay,
email me.
yeah.
But that's pretty consistent though with any warning.
Yes.
It's usually, you know,
So not-
one
not
position
to
for
have
2 years
candidates.
or whatever.
Okay.
So you'll see that on page 40, this is the section of the warning that talks about board members, and it's just the number of board members people are voting on, and then the names would appear on the ballot itself. Again, the Secretary of State's office, the election division was involved in all of this drafting.
So the warning is simply to say, this is when the votes have taken.
This is what you're voting on. Yep, and then the individual names would be on the ballot.
All right, thank you.
So we're on page 40, section 713, the certification of votes, designation of district as a union school district, and the recording by the Secretary of State. So again, this is the vast majority of this is all current law, rewritten for clarity and some detail added here.
So again, and don't get me wrong, this, I understand that sort of the need to go through all this, but most of this is like people have used this language
Correct,
for years.
correct, correct.
Okay, so this is just constantly clarifying, even though a lot of it, as it relates to 46, may never be used again.
Right, I think you've heard testimony, I think maybe from Donna, and I know I heard it on the other side, that there is at least one merger underway right now, but yes.
Okay,
Union school districts can merge to create a bigger union school
so
district.
they would reference, I'm just thinking of the floor discussion. When Senator Terenzini presents it, make sure he has all of the answers that he needs.
How do I request a new committee?
If you don't want to go through in as much detail, we could look at the outline.
No, this is all,
Okay,
no, this is
okay.
all, because I like, yeah, we probably, we'll probably share this in some ways in the committee.
Okay.
So it's helpful, yeah.
So there's been a vote. Now what do you do with the results of that vote? We're on page 40, section 713 at the very bottom, line 16. Within 45 days after the vote or 15 days after reconsideration, the clerk of each school district voting on the proposal to form a union school district certifies the results of that vote to the Secretary of Education. If the voters so we're on the top of page 41. So this is all current law. If the voters in each school district identified as necessary vote to form the district, then the necessary school districts constitute a union school district together with any advisable district that votes to join. If the voters approve formation, then the secretary designates, the Secretary of Education designates the newly formed district as a union school district. I'm on line 12. And then the Secretary of Education certifies that designation and sends the designation of the new union school district along with the individual clerk's certification of those votes to the Secretary of State. And then the Secretary of State records those certifications, and upon that recording, the union school district becomes a body politic and corporate with the powers incident to a municipal corporation.
So what, the discussion about sending it first to AOE, then to the Secretary of State, I'm just curious as to the conversation there. As elections usually go to the Secretary of State, but AOE needs to be notified of a new district. So just.
That's all current law.
This is, yeah, so.
And I don't think there was no discussion.
No
as far as,
discussion of it.
amending this
And the
draft.
Secretary of State didn't say anything about it, so.
Not to my
He
knowledge.
didn't.
They've been doing this.
And we will have
Yeah,
Secretary of State's office. And
just want to make sure that the results get sent
To the right.
right, recorded.
Yes, there are, if you go right to the next page, subsection E, line 3, it's the Secretary of State who files the certified copy of the recorded certificate with each clerk of the member district in the new union elementary. So it's the Secretary of State who's carrying out that recording process.
But there's no, not sooner than 30 days, but there's no timeline, a time within which the recording must be made.
Let's see, so
Not that it's
Within
going to be a
45
problem, but it
days.
could be a problem.
So the clerk of each school district has to certify the results to the Secretary of Education within 45 days or 15 days after a vote to reconsider.
Page 40.
Yeah, but what about?
And then on,
Okay.
and then on page 41, line, oh, you're right, no sooner than 30 days. So,
But there's no deadline for the Secretary of Education to submit this to the Secretary of State. Just can't be sooner than 30 days after initial vote.
I think you are reading that accurately, yes.
I'm trying to figure out why we wouldn't have a date certain there.
And again, this is current law.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
What page might everyone be on?
41.
Okay, my apologies, thank you.
And we're gonna go right to 42. So when the Secretary of State files a certified copy of the reported certification with each of the new member districts and then a union element, a new union district. Then it's prima facie evidence of full compliance with the requirements for the formation of a union school district. So once we get to that point, it's presumed that all of the processes that Chapter 11 outlined happened. Prima facie evidence that everyone did everything they were supposed to do to get to the formation of that school district. And then page 42, line 12, section 714. This is new. Not the entire section, but subdivision or subsection A. The tallying of at-large votes for initial board members. How do you count at-large votes when it's not one municipality taking all of these votes, right? You've got elections happening in all of these different locations. So who's gonna do that? This language is based on a process that AOE and the Secretary of State's office developed and followed during recent activity to form union school districts. The substance of what they developed isn't until page 43. Subdivision 1, line 3, within 7 days after the vote, the clerk of each school district transmits electronically to the Secretary of Education the total number of votes cast in the school district for each at-large candidate. Then the Secretary calculates the total votes for each candidate and transmits those calculations to the clerks for verification. And ballots cast by the voters of any advisable district that does not approve the proposal to form a new union school district are not included in the bottom line, right? Because they were just advisable, and if they didn't vote to join, then they don't count.
There's no date here
date
either for the secretary to certify anything.
Yep.
Okay. I'm a date searcher.
No, I'm making notes. Great.
Okay.
Then when the clerk verified the calculations, we're on page 43, line 11, the secretary prepares and executes the certification of the votes cast for each candidate.
So again, this is all new. This is language agreed, AOE and this is Secretary of State.
It's
Okay.
what they have been advising people to do.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's been used, it's in
Correct.
action. Okay.
That is my understanding. And so the secretary and the clerks working together have counted the votes. Now, who makes the notifications?
Mhm.
If the voters approve formation of a new union school district, then there's a date certain, within 30 to 45 days after the vote, or 15 days after vote to reconsider, whichever is later, the notification of the election of initial board members is sent to the Secretary of State as follows. And then this is primarily current law. The clerk of each forming district transmits the names of.
So page 44, line 3.
Mhm.
Is that where you are?
No, page 43.
Page 43, line 16, the Secretary of
Okay.
State. So
Okay, sorry.
the clerk of each forming district transmits the names of board members elected in a manner that is proportional to town population. And then the Secretary of Education transmits the names if it was elected under either model involving at-large voting. So
And this is current law.
this is, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank
Oh,
you.
it's a hybrid. So,
Okay.
so if it's proportional to town population, remember, that's where the Secretary of Education has to help out. Because
Mhm.
all of those votes are happening in all of those individual towns. There's not one body yet to do any of that election work. If it is at large, so that was at large. If it's proportional to town population, the clerks themselves are the ones in that community that those seats are for, and so they can transmit those names. So that's.
Do you have government operations status?
They got a very quick drive-by. Very, 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 very quick. They did take testimony from the Secretary of State. Oath of office. So this is current law with some detail and some kind of clarity added. So the superintendent of the supervisory union serving the new school district can swear the initial board members in. I'm on page 44, starting on line 5, oath of office, subsection C. And the swearing in can occur prior to the organizational meeting, but it doesn't have to. And the initial board members assume office upon being sworn in. And once they're sworn in, they meet to elect one of their number to serve as the board chair and one other of its number to serve as the board clerk and to transact any other business within its jurisdiction, provided they can't do that prior to the organizational meeting. So realistically, that's the organizational meeting.
There's nothing in here about a recount. Suppose there's a close election and someone wants to have a recount. Is there anything in here that does? Good.
There's nothing in here that specifically says what happens in a recount. What you'll see is, like on page 40 is a good example. Certification of votes, line 19. The time frame for votes to be certified is within 45 days after the vote or 15 days after a vote to reconsider, and then a reference to Title 17, which is election law.
Okay.
So not every piece of election law that will apply is incorporated here, but that's how we get at reconsideration here. So we've gone through all of this election. Now these people need to do some business to get the Union School District up and running. And the first meeting is the organizational meeting. I'm on page 44, section 715. This is all current law with a little bit of detail and clarity added, but all current concepts in current law. The Union School District so we now have a Union School District, right? Before we were using all of these terms like proposed and all of, proposed. Now we actually have a Union School District. It has to hold an organizational meeting within 60 days after the Secretary of State certification. It has to post a notice that's having this organizational meeting. And so it requires that the Secretary of Education will prepare and execute a warning for the organizational meeting. The warning will give the notice of the day, hour, and location. That's current law. The Secretary of Education transmits the signed warning to the superintendent, who posts the warning in at least one public place in each town within the Union District, and causes the warning to be published once in the newspaper in general circulation. And the posting shall be made not more than 40 days nor less than 30 days before the date of the meeting. I believe that paragraph that I just read is, so page 45, lines 5 through 10 is, I think the concept is not new, but the level of detail here is new, that the superintendent is the one doing this posting, so that there's not, or obviously someone he discharges with that duty, he or she discharges with that duty. But so it's clear that who's doing this posting, because they haven't elected board clerk yet, they haven't elected the district clerk yet, so who's doing all of that? The Union School District bears the cost of the posting, current law, and then what business do they do? Page 45, line 13 through let's see. Line 47 is the business that they are transacting in that organizational meeting. And that is all current law, except our first policy decision is on page 46.
So we're getting mixed up here.
Mhm.
So we're having an organizational meeting of a district board.
Correct.
And then we're electing a clerk and a providing officer from among the voters. Does that mean the board, just the board of the voters, or the voters, the general? everybody.
The voters present at the organizational meeting.
Wait,
So,
that's
no,
all-
that's the board.
The board, okay, shoot, okay, why don't we say that?
Instead of among voters, they.
Yeah,
among the
registered
board
voters,
members.
it says, and the registered voters shall consider. I'm
Oh,
just,
I think that is actually from the voters.
so why is the voters voting for the clerk of the board when the board is organizing itself?
So that's the temporary clerk of the district.
I
So
know,
there's,
but there's a district board.
right, so,
But so they all sit there up on the stage.
Mhm.
I've been to one of these, and then then all the voters in the audience vote to nominate and a clerk. I'm just trying to sort this out.
well, let me just put this in context here. Clerk of the board. Okay,
So hold an organizational meeting, Union School District.
I believe,
Okay, so it's the district.
I believe this is for the board
Totally.
members. The temporary, let's see.
I'm totally confused. Shouldn't be confused, it should be.
So, but the voters present, is it the voters of the board of the?
Right, there's an organizational meeting of
This
the
is just the
district.
board electing a clerk, is that accurate?
Well, I don't
Yeah, so
know.
I agree that this is, I apologize, I don't have an easy answer for you here. I agree that subdivision A is confusing because you'll
Mhm.
see on the next page, it's electing the clerk of the district is
Mhm.
very clear that it's among the voters. It's different. They're clearly contemplating two different things here, but the language is the same. So I need to go back to the drawing board and iron that out.
Okay. I don't have to worry about it.
That also connects to the policy itself
Right.
that we're considering. So would you be willing, I think this is a good spot to pause actually, to stop, because we can return to this where we have the policy decision with new language tomorrow that incorporates both of those. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
I think I'm good.
That would be helpful. And so tomorrow we'll spend another hour, but I think we'll make it closer to finishing this section tomorrow. And I think pausing when we have a policy decision is a good place to do that.
And did Donna send you the policy document so you can see kind of like the way this policy decision was flagged? The text for it.
So if you look at page 46, and it talks about electing a moderator, now I think I begin to get it.
Mhm.
So it's really the whole group, it's like the municipality. and-
Correct.
Yeah, so it's not the select board, it's not the board itself, or the district board, it is everybody who comes in and elects the moderator and then the clerk for the meeting. I'm thinking it's for that.
For that organizational meeting.
organizational
I believe that is what's happening.
That's
It's
right.
that you need someone in that meeting to do that work
To get the
Yeah.
work done.
in order to elect the actual clerk of the district. I believe that's what's happening here, but I want to.
Yeah, that would be great if you would.
Donna just sent a note, by the way.
Oh, good. She's gonna clerk.
This is the sorry, I just need to.
Go ahead and read it.
This is the organizational meeting of the district and not the board.
Okay, so I was wrong. I thought it was, okay, so this is the organizational meeting for the district.
Yeah, that next page helps when you
Yeah.
get to the moderator page.
Okay, so we'll pause here. Does that feel okay?
Yep.
And we'll come back with any new language that was clarification language, clarifying language tomorrow around this, and then we'll just continue to push forward with this. Committee, anything else? Yeah, we're good to go offline.